Hello, it's Adam in the studio.
And Laura in the studio, and we are still 2 meters apart.
Yeah, even though legally we don't need to be anymore.
Yes, but I think lots of people are still taking precautions, Lots of people are still wearing masks everywhere. On some forms of transport, you're still expected to wear a mask too. So, fascinating over the next few weeks to see the kinds of decisions people are taking themselves.
Yeah, and it's the last episode of Newscast before the summer holidays because it's the last day of Parliament before the summer holidays. So there's a quite louche atmosphere.
Well, in our there would never be a louche atmosphere in our newsroom.
Yeah,
never, ever, 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 ever.
But unfortunately,
not allowed.
Chris Mason is on the louche. He's not here, so he's not in his cupboard.
No.
But we decided to replace him with two friends of the podcast.
Yes.
Restored to her rightful place on late night Thursday night political TV. It's Liz Kendall, the Shadow Care Minister. Hello.
Hello.
You used to do this with someone called Andrew Neil. Not sure what happened to him.
I haven't seen or heard of him since.
have you been invited on GB News yet, Liz?
I have actually, but I haven't unfortunately been unable to attend.
Oh, okay. Because you're busy doing us. And talking of GBs, we've got Gavin Barwell, former Chief of Staff to Theresa May. Hello.
Hello. Smooth intro.
Smooth
intro.
Smooth.
You must be getting a bit annoyed being introduced like that because it was a while ago. You've done a lot since, haven't you?
No, I'm very happy. I think that will be probably my moniker for some time to come. I've got used to that.
Well, they call this, what is it, taking out the trash day in Parliament, when you just flood Parliament with announcements and papers and reports and inquiries and all that
and
stuff.
hope that everyone's so excited about going on holiday that they don't read any of them.
Yeah, well,
that would never happen.
We're going to do the good podcast equivalent of just telling you what you need to know that's happened this week on this edition of Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello. Yes, I wonder when actually we will ever get closer than 2 meters. I mean, you know me and hugging and personal space and all that, though.
Well, I mean, this has actually quite suited you, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, not that I would now, because we are still deliberately sitting 2 meters apart, but I know actually if I came and moved close to you, you would probably move a bit further away.
Nothing personal. I've just got a bit used to having my own space. Anyway, right,
dear.
okay. So if you talk about this as like the last leg before the summer holidays, you have done a sprint finish because you did that massive interview with Dominic Cummings, which people have been talking about for days and days and days.
Yes.
And for me, I'm still amazed when I hear this bit, which is the bit where he basically talks about a bit of a coup against Boris Johnson. Let's have a listen.
You've just said that within months of the Prime Minister winning the biggest Conservative majority in decades, you and a few others from the Vote Leave campaign were discussing the possibility of getting rid of him.
Days, not months.
Within days of the election, you were discussing getting rid of him.
Yes. Well, for all the reasons we've been discussing.
Well, you can't say clearer than that, can you? But to give some context, so the way that he was recounting this position that he found himself in with some of his former comrades for Vote Leave was that before the December 19 election, Boris Johnson and his then fiancée had felt that Dominic Cummings and the Vote Leave team were the best people to guarantee victory. Once that victory was secured, he claims, the attitude changed, and he alleges, which Downing Street denies and says that political appointments are entirely for the Prime Minister, but he's alleged that Carrie Johnson was trying to interfere in appointments. And therefore, for him and his team, that became very clear. So they sat around and thought, hang on a minute, if it goes on like this, by the summer, either we'll have gone or we'll be having to think about trying to replace him. And, as he said himself, one of the things I asked him, said, well, who was using who? And he said, well, it was really clear. Of course, we were using each other. I thought I could exploit him and there were certain things that I wanted to do and he wanted me to be useful to him. So very transactional. But I think there were quite a lot of raised eyebrows this week. I'll just put it that way.
Especially yours, which shot off your head at one point. Now, Gavin, did you believe that stuff about the quote-unquote coup from Dominic Cummings? Or do you think that was just a bit of bravado, a bit of hubris?
No, I don't think it was bravado. I mean, I agree with you. I think it was the most incredible bit of the interview. If you've done that job in Number 10, there's a real danger it goes to your head, right? Because the whole system, and if you go on a foreign trip, the foreign governments treat you like the number 2 person in the British government. And the truth is, your staff, the job title, I know he didn't have the job title, but he was effectively Chief of Staff. And the key word in the title is staff, not chief. And he appeared to have lost sight of that. Laura put the question to him. The British people had just elected Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. And if Boris and Carrie had decided they didn't want him anymore, then that meant that they were leaving. There isn't an or where you think, oh, well, they don't want me, so we'll try and arrange someone else to be Prime Minister. That's not how it works. And I just thought it was a jaw-dropping moment. And I think any advisor who begins to believe that they're as important as the principal is in real trouble.
And Liz, was this just a massive open goal for Labour, or have they not actually really been exploiting it that much?
I think what came out of it for me was just the arrogance, really, that it was all about this sort of internal power play, not about focusing on the massive issues for the country. Look, I think whilst it's true to say some of this is Westminster bubble, I do think one of the things people really remember from the pandemic was the whole Cuenssberg Castle trip. You know, it really did come up from people who just could not believe, after what they were doing, that it was so arrogant of Cummings to think there was another rule for him. And I think, for me, we've seen a bit of that over the last week too, with Johnson and Sunak, saying they weren't self-isolating, they were on some pilot, when everybody else is going through it, people having to do their home schooling and not go to work because they're self-isolating. And I think what this reveals is actually a real issue for the government, that the sort of dishonesty, the arrogance is something that is starting to come through from people that people don't like, and that's a real problem for them.
I think why it's tricky, and when I've talked to ministers and MPs reacting to what they watched, is that whether or not you like or loathe Dominic Cummings, whether or not you believe every single word he says, some of what he's claiming speaks to wider truths, and particularly the autumn lockdown or not lockdown, for example.
Yep.
The allegations that he were making, I've heard those same things, as you and I have discussed on this podcast before, from people who've got absolutely no axe to grind, of people who are really worried, and also about the Prime Minister's kind of leadership style. You know, I've heard those concerns articulated by people who do not have an axe to grind, and I think that's why it's kind of tricky.
I was very pleased with myself when I coined the phrase rogue advisor, but not necessarily rogue opinions.
Oh,
pretty smart,
I like it.
But one of the bits that ended up on the cutting room floor of the big BBC Two bonanza was when he talked about the Northern Ireland Protocol in the Brexit deal.
Yes.
And then you went to the cutting room floor and dragged it out, because then the Northern Ireland Protocol became news again. And this is what Dominic Cummings said about what the UK agreed with the EU and why it was kind of in both interests to do it in a certain way, allegedly.
Our view was that we were signing up to something in terms of Ireland that was deliberately opaque on both sides. So it suited both sides to sign up to something that was not what either side really wanted, and which punted difficult questions into the future to figure out later. That suited them and it suited us.
A European Union deal with the UK that actually left some things unresolved. Who would have thought it, Adam?
Yeah, but as we've discussed previously, that is a very extreme interpretation of things being left open, because it's like the EU had a very different view of what the items that needed to be closed.
Indeed.
Gavin, I mean, I know the word backstop probably brings you out in a rash, but what did you think when you heard that little excerpt?
I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, of course, there were a few of the details to be tied down, but the government is trying to pretend that it didn't realise when it signed up to the protocol that it was going to mean checks when goods were moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. It's total nonsense. Like, if they'd read the explanatory note for the bill that they published, it said it very clearly in there. I heard one government minister on the broadcast around this morning saying they didn't know what they was, they didn't know there were going to be all these problems, and they didn't know, this wasn't ever designed to last forever. Well, both of those things are untrue. Lots of people told them there were going to be these problems. And the main change that Boris made from Theresa's deal was that she had, as you said, a backstop, an insurance policy in case the main deal wasn't ready in time. Whereas this is a front stop. It's going to last forever unless the Northern Ireland Assembly ever votes to remove democratic consent from it.
And Gavin, what do you think they're really trying to achieve then? Because I know, you are a Conservative. You don't necessarily have an affinity with this current administration, but, you are a Conservative. You're one of the few people on the planet who properly understands the process that went on here and negotiations and what it was like to be on the other side of the table to the EU. But the government's now saying they actually want to rewrite some of the deal. What do you think they're really up to? And do you think that might achieve anything?
So, I mean, first of all, I have an affinity with the government on some of the things it's trying to do, on net zero or levelling up, but not on Brexit. And I'm afraid the only conclusion I can reach about what they're trying to do is that they signed up to something because they needed a deal to fight an election. Their original plan was to prorogue Parliament and leave without a deal, and that didn't work. And then they needed a deal because it was much easier to fight a general election with an oven-ready Brexit deal than to fight one without it. So they thought, well, we'll sign up to what we need to sign up to, and we'll try and wriggle it out of it down the line. And the EU, I think, have cottoned on to that, and that's why we're heading for another showdown at the end of September.
But why was it okay for you to have a backstop that would be superseded by future negotiations with the EU that meant you didn't need it? But it's not okay for this lot to have signed a protocol in the hope that you could then negotiate something that supersedes it that's better?
Well, it's not for me to talk for the EU, but the EU would say that this wasn't a backstop. This wasn't a sort of reserved option. This was the long-term solution for the trading relationship in terms of how the special problems that Northern Ireland poses when it comes to Brexit.
But is it fair, Gavin, though, to say that there is a spectrum in how this might have been actually applied?
Yeah,
because
of course it is.
Right.
Of course it is. And so I have every sympathy with people in Northern Ireland who are frustrated with this deal. But the problem, Laura, as you'll know, is that if you develop a reputation for people that don't honour things they sign up to, the other side gets like ultra sticking to the rules about how it's to be done.
So you lose the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, there's a pattern of behaviour here going back to the internal markets bill that we had last autumn. So the EU might well be minded to give ground on some of these things if it really trusts the people that it's negotiating with. But the danger is that the government's pattern of behaviour has destroyed that trust, and that's going to make extracting concessions from them even more difficult.
Now, Liz, let's talk about the subject that brings you out in a rash, why there's no reform to social care. Because in a parallel universe, actually, tonight, we might well have been discussing the government's new plan for fixing social care in England. And it might be a cap on how much you pay in your lifetime. It might be a change to the means test. It might be a new increase in national insurance.
And it was planned for yesterday, right?
Well, really?
It was planned to be announced yesterday.
Okay. But instead, you now have the press conference with the Prime Minister on Monday, where he was locked up at Chequers, and Harry Cole, the political editor of The Sun, said, is it true that you're going to put up national insurance to pay for this cap on social care? And here's what the Prime Minister said to Harry Cole.
And on your final point about fiscal measures, which I think may be a brilliantly veiled question on the long-awaited plans to deal with the problem of social care and how to cover all that and health care as well. A problem that has bedeviled governments for at least 3 decades. All I can say, Harry, is we waited 3 decades. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer.
Now, the other significant thing about that quote there is he was actually asked, will you stick to your manifesto commitment to not increase national insurance? And I didn't hear him saying, yes, I will stick to that commitment, which is...
No, he didn't. So, Liz, what do you make of this? I know, you care passionately about this issue.
I do. I think along with climate change, this is the challenge of our generation. I think that the government has got itself in a complete mess here. We heard, first of all, there was going to be a levy to pay for social care, then that levy was going to pay to fix the NHS backlog, and then social care a bit later, and then today we heard, it might be for the NHS pay rise. And then when you look at national insurance contributions, Sajid Javid is on a Conservative Party HQ tweet saying absolutely categorically no rise in income tax, national insurance or VAT.
But if the government comes back in September, say, for example, and says what they almost were going to say today, we're going to put up national insurance by a penny or by 2 pennies in the pound to pay for social care, would Labour support that?
That's not the approach that Labour would take. Labour absolutely wants to see a publicly funded needs-based system of social care. We would only set out details of what we do if we could show how we pay for it, which the government hasn't done. And I think we would absolutely guarantee that the burden doesn't just fall on young people and the low-paid alone. I don't think that's...
Well, okay, let's try and solve this problem then, though, Liz. So let's say they did come forward with a proposal, as Laura said, that's 1p or 2p on national insurance. What else would they have to do in addition to that to get you to vote for it?
We've also got to look, if you don't mind me saying, Adam, is we've got no guarantee any of this is going to go on social care at the moment. We don't know if it's going on the backlog, if it's going on NHS pay. As you know, I have always been, and Gavin himself will know this, as we spoke about it when Theresa May was Prime Minister. I have always been very keen to get long-term cross-party agreement on this. I mean, the government doesn't have to, it's got a majority, but because it's such a long-term issue. But I would just say this, any mechanism for funding has to be fair across income and fair across the generations. And it's also got to be about more than the cap alone, vital as the cap is. Those are the tests that the Prime Minister, I think, has to meet. And at the moment, I've got no idea where they are on any of those things.
Interesting. Well, someone senior in the government said to me about 10 days ago, I said, what are you going to do about social care? And they said, well, no reform, no extra cash. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. So I think they are, particularly the Treasury.
That sounds like a Treasury line, I was going to say.
Well, no, I would never reveal my sources. I would not. And I wouldn't say anything, obviously, but I think the government is trying to look at all of the bits of the machine, all the nuts and bolts and all the spanners, rather than just saying, here's loads more cash, for all the problems that Liz was talking about. And we've seen in the pandemic as well how fragmented the system is and what a problem that was. Gavin, just quickly from you on this, if you can. Do you think that Boris Johnson would get away with breaking the tax promise to pay for social care?
Yes. It'll be embarrassing and voters will obviously some voters will understandably be angry about it. But social care needs fixing, and given the fiscal position we're in, we're going to need to raise some taxes to pay for that. And
the Tory backbenchers would be up for it, you reckon?
Yes, I think the Tory backbenchers will understand the need to do something. I think Liz is actually right in what she said. Right, we need our politics is in a mess generally at the moment, but it's particularly bad at dealing with these long-term issues. And you do need to try and develop some kind of cross-party approach here. And with Jeremy Corbyn no longer being in place leading the Labour Party, I think there's a better prospect of doing that. So, I actually agree with Liz. I don't think national insurance is the best tax to look at for the reasons that she articulated. But I hope Labour would recognise that social care needs more money. And given our fiscal position, that is going to require a tax rise. And of course, it's legitimate to point out, well, you're breaking your manifesto promise. But that is what needs to happen in order to solve this problem.
That's going to be very interesting to watch and see. Very interesting indeed. Because there are Tory nerves, seriously, not just about putting the tax up, but actually about putting the tax up without making the case for it before. Enough people around the Westminster Village went, hang on, just got to do this in a way that is sort of properly thought through.
Okay.
Not that they've been thinking through the policy for months and months and months and years and years and years and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
But one quite interesting thing happened on the floor of the House today on the final day, didn't it, Adam?
Massive slap on the wrist for the Labour MP, Dawn Butler. Here's how it played out.
The Prime Minister has lied to this House time and time again. And it's funny that we get in trouble in this place for calling out the lie rather than the person lying.
Order, order, order. Please reflect on your words and withdraw your remarks.
Deputy Speaker, I've reflected on my words and somebody needs to tell the truth in this House that the Prime Minister has lied.
I order the member to withdraw immediately from the House for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Now, that was Dawn Butler, Labour MP, getting properly told off for using the L word, which you may not know, but it is absolutely the case that MPs, the convention is, they're not allowed to call each other a liar. They're not allowed to claim that lies are being told. Liz, what did you make of hearing that?
Oh, it's the first time I've heard of that. I was been in a Westminster Hall debate on social care all afternoon. Look, I can understand for people how frustrating some of the conventions seem, but the Deputy Speaker did what she had to do. I absolutely feel that, people want to call out what Boris Johnson has been doing. And I completely understand that. But Judith Cummings, who's standing in for Rosie Winterton, who's also been pinged herself, had to do her job too. That is just the way that Parliament works. Frustrating though that can be.
Gavin, should we change those rules and those conventions so that MPs can talk like normal people? I mean, yesterday, Meg Hillier got told off by the other Deputy Speaker, Eleanor Lang, for referring to the Minister directly rather than directing her remarks through the chair. Is it time to just change all that?
So it's definitely time to change some of the conventions, I think, but I wouldn't change the one that Dawn fell foul of today. I think it's, as Liz was saying, it's absolutely right that people should be able to flag up when they don't think the Prime Minister has said something that's accurate. But we don't want to move to an American style of politics where MPs are just abusing each other in the chamber. There's a reason we have those rules there. So some of the some of the slightly ludicrous formal ones, we're all honourable member for X or whatever, I think there's a case for changing them. But actually, the one that Dawn fell foul of today, I would keep. I don't want to see our MP. Politics is abrasive and unpleasant enough at the moment without giving licence to that, I would say. But
Gavin, as someone who's got impeccable manners and is always very polite, even when you're in the chamber as an MP, there is... Boris Johnson has a complicated relationship with the truth. Not that long ago, I wrote a piece about his relationship with the truth. And, there's a lot of activity about this on social media. A lot of people feel very strongly. How would you describe his relationship with facts and truth? And are you comfortable with it? So, the first thing I would say is that nearly all prime ministers that I've listened to PMQs say things that I don't think are true. Theresa May said things that weren't true. Yeah, she will absolutely sometimes have used statistics that aren't right.
What, by mistake or deliberately?
Not deliberately, no.
Okay.
But that's my point, right? Sometimes when politicians say something, it isn't that they've deliberately set out to deceive the journalist that's interviewing them or the public who are listening to the interview. They've misremembered a statistic or misapplied it. Now, one of the things I would take issue with the current Prime Minister, and if I was advising him, I would say this to his face, is that when that happens... you should just be honest about it and admit it. Patrick Vallance the other day got a statistic quite badly
spectacularly wrong.
Right?
Well, and thankfully wrong.
Yeah.
Right? But he then tweeted very clearly, I got that wrong. I think we have a culture in our politics where people are so scared to admit a sort of U-turn or a mistake or an error that they try and pretend that black is white. And voters can see through it. They don't like it. Now, one of the most interesting discussions I had with Theresa, when I started working for her, was about the moment in the 2017 election campaign when she said nothing has changed, when she'd completely changed the policy on social care. And I knew entirely why that had happened, because you're trained as a politician not to admit a U-turn. But actually, maybe it would have been better in that interview for her to say, actually, it's a massive U-turn. And if people vote for me in this election, they'll know that they're getting someone who, if I get something wrong, I'm going to put my hand up, recognise it and put it right.
Yeah, okay? When we were on the road, actually, that's always what people say. It's not that sometimes people get things wrong. It's the politicians then pretend that they haven't and pretend that everything they said just was always, Yeah, exactly.
I have to say, though, that day Theresa May did the nothing has changed. That's a human gift that I do sometimes when I lose my temper. I go, nothing has changed. And it's great when people recognise it and then people don't recognise it. Liz, we don't have any conventions in this podcast, as you may have been able to work out. Would you like to take this opportunity to call Boris Johnson a liar? You won't get a slap on the wrist.
I think he's, said things that are completely untrue. He probably knew it at the time that he said it. And I think, honestly, that is one of the things in the end that will be his undoing, that sort of dishonesty. Because
you didn't use the L word, though. You didn't say he is a liar.
The British people are pretty savvy. In the end, they get the measure of a person. And I think that, plus on some really big issues, a lack of substance. I mean, you probably talked about it last week, but, his speech or lack of a speech on levelling up. In the end, I think that sort of the dishonesty and the sort of arrogance that you can say whatever you want and nothing will ever come back at you. That plus the sort of real lack of substance on what's the vision for the country now. I think that is what is next year. We're really going to see that harming him.
Well, we shall see, and we'll be back in the autumn with plenty more TV newscasts, won't we? And I do hope that this...
Unless we get cancelled, I don't know.
Oh, well, we don't know. These days, you never know. But it's been very nice having you two on for our final newscast of the parliamentary session of 2021.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you both.
And thank you, Gavin.
Pleasure.
Now, I've got some important staff news to announce.
Okay.
I still call him Producer Dino. He'll always be Producer Dino to me, even though for about 2 years he's been Editor Dino. Today he announced that he's not just leaving Newscast, but he's leaving the BBC. And so we thought we'd give him a bit of a send-off. Hello, Dino.
Hello.
Dino, you're on the telly.
I know, right? How strange.
And for people who didn't know who Dino was, or maybe only glimpsed him through the glass when he was allowed to sit in the studio, he invented Election Cast, which became Brexit Cast, which went back to being Election Cast, which became Coronavirus Newscast, which then gave birth to Americast, which then became Newscast again, and a few other podcasts along the way. But they're far too cool for us to listen to. So you are quite an impresario.
Well, thank you very much. And just joking aside, I just want to say how fun it's been working with you guys. And really, to be honest, the only reason these podcasts are so successful as they have been is because of you, the talent, as we call you.
Oh,
and
don't
how
say that.
I actually had a call from our friend Katya Adler earlier when she found out I was leaving. And we were just saying how rare it is in this business to create something like we did with Brexitcast and Newscast that sort of connects so much with listeners, and all the lovely messages we had from you all, and emails, and how much everybody cares so much about the podcast. So I'm really proud of everything we've done together, and I will miss you all so much.
Oh, thanks.
I completely agree. And yeah, you've been a total superstar.
Yeah, so that was very classy, your little goodbye speech there. But now we're going to do something that's classic Newscast.
Great.
Yes.
Which is a quiz. And it's the Dino's Newscast graduation quiz.
Does he know about this? Do you know?
No, I don't.
So, we haven't done one of these for a while. So, should we do it turnabout?
Yeah.
So, question 1 is from Katya Adler. And don't worry, it's multiple choice. Which Brexit buzzword did Katya and Laura relish pronouncing? Was it Gibraltar, Espana, Michel Barnier's briefcase?
Gibraltar.
Let's see, was that the correct answer? Yes, it is. Gibraltar.
Back of the net. Right, question 2. This is from Chris. Which of the following words or phrases was not used in a Brexit cast or newscast title? Oh, God, I wish I'd read this before I'm reading it out. A, Willies in zips. B, cherry picking. C, intense whipping.
Willies and zips.
No, you are wrong.
Really?
Yes, cherry picking. Although we said it every week for about 100 years.
Did we not have that in a title?
No, there was an episode
God.
in February 2018 called Sherry Picking.
Right,
And
yeah,
BBC
yeah.
Sounds described it as this: Damon Albarn, dogs, and David Davis.
Who wrote that?
Ring any bells? I don't know. I mean, I love Damon Albarn, but
Right.
what the earth is going on? Okay, right, let's
Next
crack on.
question, and this is from Laura Kuenssberg.
Yes.
Who is Mrs Hairspray? Is it Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, Theresa May, or Katya Adler?
Ursula.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, question 4. When we doorstepped Guy Ritchie, oh, sorry, this is Adam's question. When we doorstepped Guy
remember that.
Ritchie, who else was with him? Was it A, Paul Gambaccini, B, Paul Hollywood, or C, Paul Weller?
I'll never forget this. It was so embarrassing. It was Paul Weller.
That's quite cool. I
Correct.
didn't
That
know
was-
that. But we have a prize for you.
Yes, it is.
Prize.
Yes.
Wow.
Look down.
Okay.
Pick it up
It is
and show it to the camera.
a photo, your favourite photo. It's the Greek Prime Minister getting his COVID jab, but with your face on it instead.
Hold it a bit closer to the camera so everyone can see. There he is. Dino so fast being vaccinated.
Bye, Dino, and thank you for
Thank you.
everything. I really mean it.
Thank you so much. Love you all very much. And let's go for a drink.
And before my mascara runs all over my face, an important clarification that I'm sure Dino would wish us to make.
Yes. So Newscast is carrying on as a podcast, even in his absence, and we'll be back as a TV show in September.
So, television viewers, have a lovely, lovely summer. We'll see you on the other side.
Podcast
Podcasters.
listeners, see you tomorrow.
Good night, everyone.
Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.